Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and where we support each other in our spiritual search for truth and meaning. My name is Rev Kate, and I am so glad that you have joined us this morning through our live stream. I feel you with me this morning. And I also thank our small worship and tech crew here with me in the sanctuary. I want to lift up in my prayers this morning Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. While they were live streaming from their sanctuary yesterday, a gunman came and took their rabbi and others hostage. Thankfully, all of the hostages made it out safely, but it must have been so scary for them and for those folks who were watching from home. So let's send some prayerful energy to them now. Before we begin our service, I have a few announcements to share with you. We are doing some mold remediation on the ground floor of the Meetinghouse this week. We just passed the 4th anniversary of our big flood, and our building has been letting us know that she remembers it vividly. The Meetinghouse will be closed, including to staff and pantry volunteers, on Tuesday and Wednesday for that work. We are also closed tomorrow for the Martin Luther King holiday. Our amazing board of directors has voted to continue the suspension of in-person attendance at Sunday services for another month. They will revisit this decision at their next meeting on February 13th. Our prayers and offers of help go out to any members and friends who are sick with COVID. The news seems to be encouraging that we may have peaked with this latest COVID variant, but it is still highly contagious, so please stay safe and careful out there. Zoom coffee hour continues on Tuesday nights at 5 o'clock. And we will be having a special coffee hour on Tuesday, January 25th to honor our office administrator, April, who is moving on after over a decade in that position. So please join us as we celebrate her. And now please join me in affirming our community's covenant. You can repeat each line after me. Love is the spirit of this meeting house.
Love is the spirit of this meeting house.
This is our great covenant.
This is our great covenant.
To dwell together in peace.
To dwell together in peace.
To seek the truth in love.
To seek the truth in love.
And to help one another.
And to help one another.
At this time, I invite Kathleen to light our chalice. And while we light our chalice here at the Meeting House, I invite you to light a candle wherever you are. In that way, we can feel together, even while we are apart.
Chalice lighting by Cynthia Landrum. We light this chalice, the beacon that calls us to love, to justice, to a deepening of the spirit.
Please join me now in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Our prayer this morning is by Wayne Arneson. Spirit of life, we quiet ourselves in prayer today, seeking a part of ourselves, knowing that we do not live alone and knowing we cannot live fully if we are for ourselves alone. We gather in thanks for the life and ministry of Martin Luther King Jr., not because we wish to worship him as a saint, but because we wish to embody his dream as a possibility that we make real. We gather with full knowledge of our shortcomings. Our lives set before us many tasks, and often we are not equal to them. We fall short of our own expectations. We find we do not know enough. We are not always patient. We fall into anger. We cannot find the strength. We lack the vision. We wait in vain for wisdom. It is painful to acknowledge our shortcomings. Yet here we are, Spirit of life. We are here, not always perfect, not always wise, not always just, but wonderfully and mysteriously human and alive. We dedicate this time together to renewing our hope. May the stories we share give us courage. May the songs we sing give us hope. May the words we speak give us wisdom. And most of all, may our attention this hour restore in us faith that this world may be made whole with all its people one. We pause in silence, honoring these hopes and aspirations. Amen.
Our reading this morning is from the book Change Sings, a children's anthem by wonderful Amanda Gorman. It's a book you might want to check out. It's written for children, and it's one of those books, you know, that's really written for all of us. I can hear change humming in its loudest, proudest song. I don't fear change coming, and so I sing along. I scream with the skies of red and blue streamers. I dream with the cries of tried and true dreamers. I'm a chant that rises and sings. There is hope where my change rings. Though some don't understand it, those windmills of mysteries, I sing with all the planet and its hills of histories. I hum with 100 hearts, each of us lifting a hand. I use my strength and my smarts, take a knee to make a stand. I'm bright as the light each day brings. There is love where my change sings. I show others tolerance, though it might take some courage. I don't make a taller fence, but fight to build a better bridge. I talk not only of distances from where and how we came, I also walk our differences to show we are the same. I'm a movement that roars and springs. There's a wave where my change sings. Change sings where? There, inside me, because I'm the change I want to see. As I grow, it grows like seeds. I am just what this world needs. I'm the voice where freedom rings. You're the love your bright heart brings. We are the wave starting to spring, for we are the change we sing. We're what the world is becoming, and we know it won't be long. We all hear change strumming. Won't you sing along?
Now is the time in our service where we take a collection for the ongoing support of this meeting house and our shared ministry. As we enjoy a musical reflection, we welcome your donations through PayPal or Venmo. You can find that information on our website, UUMH.org. Whether you give online or through other ways, we are so grateful for your support.
We shall live in peace someday.
we shall overcome someday.
Thank you. This morning, we remember and celebrate Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We remember the incredibly moving words that he spoke to generations of people who were so inspired that they then changed the nation. In non-COVID years, my MLK Day tradition is to join the walk in Wellfleet. We gather in a circle at Town Hall, sing freedom songs, then walk in silence with our signs down Main Street to the library and back to Preservation Hall. Every year we smush ourselves into the hall to watch King's I Have a Dream speech on the big screen. We've seen it so many times that we can recite parts of it from memory. Martin Luther King Jr. has become such a beloved figure in our history that he is like a friend to us. We have a painting of him hanging downstairs in Acker Bosworth Hall. Once, when I took a picture of someone standing near the painting and posted it on Facebook, Facebook recognized him and tagged him in the photo. Creepy, right? But also comforting. He's like one of us. We quote the same lines each year until we feel we know Martin Luther King, because those words are part of us, part of our story. We know that hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. We know that our children should not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. We know that faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And these are good things to know by heart. But it's also a dangerous thing to memorize 10 quotes and think you know a man, to tag a historical figure in your photo and think, therefore, that he is always on your side. By thinking we know Martin Luther King, we sometimes end up using his image against those who are working for justice today. I have heard people condemn the protests in Ferguson, Minneapolis, Portland, and other places by saying Martin Luther King was a peaceful protester. He would never support that rioting. But what about this quote from A Testament of Hope? I am not sad that Black Americans are rebelling, King said. This was not only inevitable, but eminently desirable. Without this magnificent ferment, the old evasions and procrastinations would have continued indefinitely. Black men have slammed the door shut on a past of deadening passivity. Except for the Reconstruction years, they have never in their long history on American soil struggled with such creativity and courage for their freedom. These are our bright years of emergence. Though they are painful ones, they cannot be avoided. Those words ring true to me today. The Black Lives Matter movement is a creative and courageous movement. Painful, yes, and necessary. The protests all across our country are disruptive, yes, and can even get scary, but it means people are doing something, paying attention. They're not just standing by while injustices happen. They are showing up. If it makes us uncomfortable, if we don't like how they are doing it, if we say, "But look how far we've come," instead of listening to the deep anguish being expressed, we actually might be part of the problem. Here's another King quote that we need to know. It's from his letter from a Birmingham jail in 1963. "First, I must confess that over the last few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your method of direct action,' who paternalistically feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." I try to remember this quote every time I grow tired of our racial justice work. Every time I see people getting uncomfortable and I am tempted to smooth things over instead of dig into the hard and uncomfortable work. If we're going to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. every year, then we need to pay attention to all of his words, not just some of them. The ones that challenge us, as well as the ones that make us feel good about ourselves. And we need to educate ourselves about some of the more radical things that he stood for so that we can better understand what he might have stood for today. When Coretta Scott King fought for a holiday named after her husband, she was not doing so just so that we would remember him. She was doing so that we would have a reminder every year to carry on his work ourselves. Their daughter, Dr. Bernice King, recently wrote, "Our mother worked tirelessly to secure a holiday in our father's honor that would galvanize people across this nation to commemorate my father's life and his teachings, not with a day off, but with a day on, to educate, advocate, and activate. It was her intent at the very outset that these efforts extend beyond that one particular day, to encompass strategic work to eliminate what my father called the triple evils of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism, and to create the beloved community." So if tomorrow is a day on instead of a day off, how do we know what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would want us to be working on? I can think of 3 ways. One way is to learn more about the things that he was already working on, not just racism, but also poverty, militarism, education, Some of his ideas are actually pretty radical. Did you know that at the end of his life, King was campaigning for a guaranteed income for all Americans, whether they were working or not? It was part of what he called the Poor People's Campaign, the last major project that he worked on. He felt like the economy was the most crucial thing that the Black community and poor people of every color were confronting, that none of the other problems could get better while people remained in poverty. There was a literal depression in the Negro community, he said, but people weren't calling it that. When you have mass unemployment in the Negro community, it's called a social problem. When you have mass unemployment in the white community, it's called a depression. In what would be his last Sunday sermon, King preached, "We are coming to Washington in a poor people's campaign. Yes, we are going to bring the tired, the poor, the huddled masses. We are coming to demand that the government address itself to the problem of poverty." We read one day, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty, nor the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists. We are coming to ask America to be true to the huge promissory note that it signed years ago. And we are coming to engage in dramatic, nonviolent action, to call attention to the gulf between promise and fulfillment, to make the invisible visible." King's idea was to build a tent city in Washington, D.C., to camp out until they were listened to. King believed that the government was obligated to provide both work and income for those left behind by capitalism. I think about this as Congress debates the Build Back Better Act. What would King support? It's not very hard to guess. The Poor People's Campaign of 1968 demanded $30 billion a year to be used to combat poverty, congressional passage of a full employment and guaranteed income legislation, and construction of 500,000 low-cost housing units every year until slums were eliminated. In 1968, at the time of the Poor People's Campaign, 25 million people, nearly 13% of the population, were living below the poverty level. Last year, in this country, over 37 million people live below the poverty level, still 13% of Americans. What would Martin Luther King support today? I'm going to guess a livable minimum wage, a tax structure that fairly taxes the wealthy and corporations, free universal health care, affordable housing for all. The second way that we can guess at what MLK would have been working on tomorrow is to see what other prominent Black faith leaders are working on today. We can follow people like Reverend William Barber, the co-chair of the new Poor People's Campaign, or Senator Raphael Warnock. According to Warnock, the most important issue to be working on right now is voting rights. There is no question that voting rights is a moral issue, Warnock says. In fact, democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. The notion that each of us is a child of God, And therefore we ought to have a vote and a voice in the direction of our country and our destiny within it. And so when we defend voting rights, this is much larger than a political exercise for me, he says. It's really about the dignity of everybody's humanity and our ability to build a future that embraces all of us. It seems crazy that we are still fighting for voting rights in 2022 in a country that prides ourselves on our democracy. But here we are. We aren't fighting a poll tax or laws that say people of color can't vote, but we are fighting against barriers that make it difficult for people of color to vote or for their votes to count. Right now, our elected representatives are debating the Freedom to Vote Act. This act would stop partisan gerrymandering by creating objective standards for redistricting. It would enable all eligible voters to register at the polls right up to Election Day. Establish 15 days of early voting, including at least 2 weekends. Bar partisan purges of voter rolls by creating fair rules. Automatically restore voting rights for people returning from prison. Protect and expand access to voting by mail and drop boxes. Mandate nonpartisan election administration. And ensure the use of paper ballots that can be verified by voters and accurately recounted. One of the things standing in the way of this act passing is the filibuster, the Senate tradition of unlimited debate, which means that a minority can prolong debate to delay or prevent a vote on a bill. We don't actually have to guess what MLK would have said about this, because Martin Luther King spoke frequently about the abuse of the filibuster. I think the tragedy is that we have a Congress with a Senate that has a minority of misguided senators who will use the filibuster to keep the majority of people from even voting, he said. They won't let the majority senators vote, and certainly they wouldn't want the majority of people to vote because they know they do not represent the majority of the American people. The longest speech in Senate history, 24 hours and 18 minutes, was by South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond in 1957. It was a failed attempt to stop a civil rights bill. And the final way I know to assess what Martin Luther King would have wanted us to work on in 2022 is to listen to his family, the people who knew him best. Dr. Bernice King, daughter of Martin Luther King, makes it very clear. If voting rights is still hanging in the balance on January 17th, 2022, she says, then we must collectively use our various commemorations and platforms on that particular day to do what Dr. King would do. My father would speak and act to ensure that this nation lives up to its promise of democracy by putting pressure on our U.S. Senate to bypass the filibuster, and instead of taking the King holiday off, they should make it a day to pass the Voting Rights Act. King often lifted up the idea of beloved community. Looking around at our country today, it's hard to think of the United States as beloved community. Reading the Provincetown community space page makes it hard to even see our liberal bubble here at Land's End as beloved community. And when we disappoint and disagree with each other here at the Meetinghouse, or even just get on each other's nerves, it can be hard to see even this faith community as beloved community. I looked to King's family this week for some guidance about that too. Many consider the beloved community to be unachievable, his daughter Bernice says, because of the misunderstanding that it is a utopia. But the beloved community is not a perfect place. It's a place where imperfections don't spiral downward to become injustices, gross inhumanity, and perpetual devastation. So we can work toward beloved community without living in a perfect place, without being perfect ourselves. That is a relief to me. But the key is that we need to keep working toward it. We can't stay static. We can't be okay with how things are if people are hurting. If some people have so much and others have so little. If some people have a seat at the table and others don't. The work isn't over. It wasn't done by one man who is now dead. We are the wave starting to spring, for we are the change we sing. Won't you sing along?
One, two, three, go! One, we see that later on, we ride into, we know that we are strong and united. We exercise our rights to stand no more. That's when the love and light start to tremble. Nothing is nothing, nothing is nothing, nothing is nothing.
I think we need to internalize that song and take it into the streets. It has become our practice to pose a question based on the theme of the service each week. It can be a topic of sharing at your dinner table tonight or with friends during the week. And if you'd like to delve deeper into this question, you can join us on Zoom Tuesdays at 5. Let us know if you need that link. Here is our question for this week. What have you learned from Martin Luther King Jr.? What have you learned from Martin Luther King Jr.? Thank you for joining us this morning. Have a great day on tomorrow. Go in peace.